I don't know if I was born owing my family a debt, but it sure felt like it. I'm Elena Morales. I'm 33 now and live in Austin, Texas. I manage tech rollouts for a cybersecurity firm, make six figures, and have a nice apartment with a working washer and dryer. Luxuries I never had growing up. But none of that changes the fact that I came from a home where love was something you earned, not something you got just for existing. I grew up in Fresno, California, in a two-bedroom house that smelled like oil-stained concrete and burnt tortillas. My dad was a mechanic. My mom took in sewing and cleaned houses when we were short, which was always. They'd immigrated from Mexico in the 80s, worked hard, and always reminded me we were lucky to be here. That luck came with a lot of expectations, especially for me. I was the firstborn, the translator at the doctor's office, the one who handled bank statements when I was 11 because my parents didn't trust those people at the bank. I was also the test run kid, the one expected to understand when things weren't fair. And things were never fair. Then came Mateo, 4 years younger, always a little sickly, always coddled. He's delicate, my mom would say. He's our boy. And just like that, the rules changed. When I was 12, I won a place in a STEM summer camp sponsored by the state. Only 5 students from my district made it. I was over the moon. But when I told my parents, my mom barely looked up from her sewing machine. "Is it free?" she asked. "It comes with a scholarship," I said. She shook her head. "Then who will take care of Mateo if I have work?" And that was that. I stayed home and babysat my little brother while he played video games in the living room, and I reread the same algebra workbook I'd checked out from the library. That summer felt like watching a door close slowly, and knowing no one was going to open it for me. I kept my head down, got straight A's, took AP classes, applied for college in secret. I didn't even tell my parents when I got accepted to a pre-college science program at UC Davis. Just mailed in the forms, hoping they'd understand once the letter came. When it finally did, my dad held the envelope like it was radioactive. "Out of town?" he said, scanning the page. "So now you think you're too good for us?" My mom didn't say a word, just looked tired. I offered to stay. Again. But my high school guidance counselor, Ms. Dorsey, found out. She drove to my house with a trunk full of dorm supplies. Sheets, towels, even a secondhand microwave. "You have to go," she said. "You'll rot here." I went. And when I got into Berkeley 2 years later, I took a bus there alone with 2 duffel bags and $60 cash. But the final blow, what really broke something inside me, was my high school graduation. I was valedictorian. I had busted my ass for 4 years to earn that stage. I rehearsed my speech alone in the school bathroom for 2 weeks. I even ironed my own robe because my mom said the heat made her dizzy. They promised they'd come. I saved 2 front row tickets just for them. But when my name was called, the seats were empty. Later, I found out Mateo had a soccer tournament an hour away. He had a real shot at being scouted. My dad said, like that justified it. I gave that whole damn speech staring out at a sea of strangers. I smiled, but something in me went dark that day. Like a light switch flipped off and never fully came back on. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even mention it. I just packed my things the next morning and took the bus to my summer internship like nothing happened. That's what you learn when you're the responsible one. How to bury hurt so deep it starts to feel like part of your bone structure. I spent years believing that if I just worked hard enough, I'd earn their love. That someday they'd show up for me the way they always did for him. But now I realize they didn't forget about me. They chose him. And they expected me to be grateful for being the one they could always count on to not need anything. But that was just the beginning. It started with the Discover Card statement. I was 21, halfway through my junior year at Berkeley, living in a shared apartment that smelled like ramen and broken dreams, when I opened a letter addressed to me at my parents' house, forwarded by my mom in one of those thick yellow envelopes. No note, no warning. Just the envelope and inside it. A credit card statement for an account I didn't know existed. The balance? $12,487.33. My first instinct was that it had to be some kind of fraud, identity theft. That's what I told myself while my hands went clammy. Except the purchases weren't random or suspicious. They were just familiar. Payments to Southwest Athletics, Sport Pro Gear, a $3,200 tuition payment to something called Victory Select Travel Camp. I called the number on the statement. The woman on the other end was chipper. "Hi, Ms. Elena Morales," she said after I verified my info. "Would you like to make a payment over the phone today to avoid the interest increase?" I don't even remember hanging up. Just sitting on the edge of my mattress, staring at the wall, trying to swallow a scream that had no words. I called my mom. "Oh," she said, like I'd asked about a misplaced grocery list. "That card. We had to use it when your dad's hours got cut. You remember Mateo's camp, right? The one with the college recruiters? That's what it was for." "You opened a credit card in my name," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "We needed someone with good credit," she replied. "You always had good grades, so I figured it'd be fine." She figured it'd be fine. She figured. I should have yelled. I should have raged. But all I said was, "How long have you been making the payments?" A pause. "Well, things have been tight lately, but we'll get back on track. We just need a little help this month." That was the moment I realized they weren't going to pay it off. Not ever. They'd used my name, my future, to gamble on Mateo's soccer dreams, and when it didn't pan out, they just dropped the ball, walked away, left me holding the bill like I owed them for giving birth to me. I didn't cry. I walked to the sink and vomited. That night, I told my roommate Jasmine everything. She was the only person I knew who wouldn't sugarcoat it. "That's not just messed up," she said. "That's financial abuse." "Yeah, but it's family," I mumbled, the automatic reflex kicking in. "So? That makes it worse," she snapped. "If a boyfriend did this to you, you'd call it what it is. Just because they gave birth to you doesn't mean they get to ruin your credit score and pretend it's love." I started working double shifts at the library and picking up late-night tutoring gigs. My grades slipped for the first time ever, but I didn't care. I was in survival mode. Every spare dollar went to clawing back a credit score I didn't even damage. I tried talking to my dad about it a few weeks later. I waited until Mateo was at practice and my mom was out. He was eating conchas at the kitchen table, watching reruns of Sabado Gigante. When I told him, his face didn't even twitch. "You think we did this for fun?" he asked. "We sacrificed everything for this family. And you think one little bill makes you a victim?" "One little bill?" I laughed, a dry, cracked sound. "It's $12,000. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." He looked at me like I'd spit in his drink. "We're your parents. You owe us. Everything you are because of us." And there it was. The debt laid bare, not in dollars, but in guilt and expectation and silence. I went back to school and got a second job washing dishes at a Thai place 2 blocks from campus. I stopped taking their calls. I stopped answering Mateo's texts about needing just $50 till Friday. I told myself this was temporary, that I'd fix my credit, finish my degree, and finally be free. But freedom doesn't come cheap. And in families like mine, it doesn't come without a war. The real cost didn't hit me until senior year when I got my acceptance to a post-grad fellowship in Boston. Full stipend, travel included, a literal dream. I emailed my parents a photo of the letter. No response. 3 days later, I got a text from my mom. "Hey, can you send $300 for Mateo's new cleats? His coach says he's got a real shot this year." Not a word about Boston. Not even a congrats. Just another invoice from people who treated me like an ATM with emotions. That's when it started to click. They didn't see me. They saw what I could give. And they'd keep asking, keep draining until there was nothing left. But they weren't going to break me. I wouldn't let them. Not anymore. Boston felt like a reset button. New city. New job. New number even. Though I stupidly gave it to my mom, just in case. I told myself this was going to be the start of something better. I had clawed my way out of Fresno and into a junior project management role at a tech firm in the Seaport district. It wasn't glamorous, but the salary was steady, and for the first time in my life, I could afford my own apartment, even if it was a fourth-floor walk-up with unreliable plumbing. I bought a used couch from Facebook Marketplace, a coffee maker, plants, actual plants. They all died within a month, but I didn't care. That little apartment with its creaky hardwood floors and drafty windows? It was mine. Every cent in that space had been earned by me. Not borrowed, not guilt-tripped, not handed down with strings attached. And still, they found me. It started subtle. My mom would text, "Hope you're doing well. Mateo's been down lately. You know how sensitive he is." A week later, "Rent went up again. Your dad's hours were cut. Just a little help would go a long way." At first, I sent money. $200 here, $300 there. Nothing crazy. I figured I was just buying time, space to breathe while they figured things out. But they never figured things out. The asks kept coming. One night, I stayed late at the office debugging a product issue that had tanked a client's launch. I got home close to midnight, exhausted, barely able to see straight. I opened Instagram, just a mindless scroll before bed. And there it was. Mateo, on a beach in Bali, holding a drink with a tiny umbrella in it. Caption, "Recharge before the grind." I stared at the screen like it had slapped me. I looked around my apartment. Stack of laundry in the corner, takeout containers on the table, a half-broken chair I hadn't gotten around to fixing. And I thought, what grind? I was working 60-hour weeks, skipping dinners, budgeting like a single mom on minimum wage. And this kid, this down lately, sensitive, struggling to find his path kid, was vacationing on my dime. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even cry. I just laid there staring at the ceiling, going over every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I let guilt win. Every time they praised my strength and weaponized it against me. The next morning, I called my mom. "Did you know Mateo's in Bali?" She was quiet for a second too long. He needed to clear his head. "You don't understand how much pressure he's under." "I'm under pressure," I snapped. "I'm the one working overtime. I'm the one sending rent money while you fund his creative sabbatical." "Elena," she said, with that soft, disappointed tone she always used when I made things uncomfortable. "You've always been the strong one. We knew you could handle it." My jaw locked. There it was again. That twisted badge of honor they kept pinning on me. Strong. Translation, invisible. Resilient. Translation, disposable. "I'm done," I said. "Don't ask me for another cent." She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just sighed like I'd let her down. "I just hope you don't forget where you came from." I hung up, but I didn't forget. That was the problem. I remembered everything. I remembered the graduation speech to empty seats, the credit card debt that wasn't mine, the nights tutoring calculus while Mateo trained for a sport he never cared about until they told him he was special. I remembered trying so hard to be the good daughter that I forgot how to be a whole person. Around that time, I met Madison. She worked in marketing, sat across from me in the open office, always wore lipstick like armor. She invited me to lunch one day, and I said yes, mostly because I was tired of eating granola bars at my desk. We ended up sitting for 2 hours, talking like we'd known each other in another life. I told her about my family, just the surface stuff. She didn't pry. But 2 weeks later, when I bailed on a weekend trip last minute because I'd wired $500 home, she said gently, "That's not normal, you know." "What isn't?" "Having to finance your brother's lifestyle while you burn yourself out. That's not support. That's servitude." I laughed it off, but her words burrowed under my skin. I started noticing things I hadn't before, like how every story from home involved me giving and Mateo receiving. How family always meant my sacrifice. How my mom called more when payday was near. That realization cracked something open in me. One night, after a long week and a bottle of cheap wine, I opened up to Madison fully. I told her everything about the Discover card, the Bali photos, the phone call. She didn't look shocked. She looked angry. You know what this is, right? It's emotional blackmail, and you've been paying it with your life. That line hit me like a punch to the chest. I thought I'd escaped Fresno, but I was still living in its shadow, still acting out a role I didn't audition for. But that was about to change. The message came on a Tuesday morning during my weekly stand-up at work. I had just wrapped a major client deliverable and was actually in a good mood for once. Then my phone lit up. Mateo Morales. I ignored it. Then came the text. Hey sis, I've got a business idea. Like a clothing line, real curated stuff. I just need help with startup. $2,000 would go a long way. You in? No punctuation, no greeting. Just the assumption that I'd bankroll another one of his whims, and I wish I could say I was surprised. But I wasn't. Not after Bali. Not after watching my savings trickle out for emergencies that looked suspiciously like Airbnbs and ring lights. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop on my lunch break, logged into my credit report, and froze everything. Every card, every account, every access point. Then I changed my passwords. Called Discover. Filed an identity theft affidavit just in case. It wasn't just about protecting my credit anymore. It was about protecting me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of Pinot, staring out the window. The city buzzed around me like it always did, but something felt different. Quieter. Clearer. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone else's permission to say no. The next day, I started therapy. I'd always rolled my eyes at the idea. Growing up, therapy was for weak people, or rich people, or white people. My mom used to scoff at the thought. We didn't have therapists in Mexico. We had to survive. But I was tired of surviving. I wanted to live. Dr. Kaplan was patient and soft-spoken. She didn't tell me what to do. She just asked questions that landed like punches. Do you think your worth was ever allowed to exist separate from what you could give others? That one took my breath away. Week by week, I unpacked things I didn't even know were inside me. The shame, the guilt, the grief, not for what had happened, but for what never did. The birthday parties no one showed up for. The college acceptance that didn't get a hug. The achievements met with silence. I wasn't just healing. I was remembering myself. And somewhere in the middle of that mess, I met Darren. We bumped into each other at a local bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of The Design of Everyday Things. He was tall, a little shy, wearing a hoodie that said, "Don't talk to me unless it's about UX." We grabbed coffee. Then dinner. Then somehow 3 months passed and I realized I hadn't flinched at being seen. Darren never asked about my family at first. But one night, after I turned down a call from my mom and stared at the screen like it had insulted me personally, he asked gently, "Do they always call when you're doing well?" I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "They don't call because I'm doing well," I said. "They call because they think I owe them for it." He didn't try to fix it. He just held my hand and said, "You don't owe anyone for being who you are." Simple, but no one had ever said that to me before. I started writing again. It began as a journal. Then it became a blog. I didn't post under my name. Just EM Writes. I wrote about financial manipulation in families, about being the responsible one, about what it felt like to be loved conditionally, about what healing really looked like. Ugly, awkward, nonlinear. The post started getting traction. Comments from strangers who said they felt like I had cracked open something they didn't know how to name. One DM stood out. "My mom did this too. I thought I was crazy." Thank you. That message wrecked me. In the best way. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving this story. I was flipping it. I was turning years of exploitation into something that helped other people feel less alone. And then something happened I never expected. My tia Rosa, The aunt my mom hadn't spoken to in decades called me. She'd found my blog. She knew instantly that it was me. I left that family for the same reason you're pulling away now, she told me. They took and took until I had nothing left. I'm proud of you, mija. She said it in Spanish. Estoy orgullosa de ti. Words I never heard from my own mother. We talked for hours. She told me stories I'd never heard. About how my mom used to guilt her into covering bills. How she raised Mateo for a summer when I was 6 because my mom needed a break. How she finally drew the line when my parents took out a loan in her name and never paid it back. They don't change, she said, but you can. And I had. The next day, I wired Tia Rosa $2,000, not to pay for her trauma, but to invest in what came next. She and I started a small scholarship fund, just one student, one award, $1,500, to help a first-gen Latina student attend college without signing her life away to family pressure. We called it the Dignity First Grant, because that's what I'd finally reclaimed, and I was done apologizing for it. When the blog went viral, I didn't know at first. I'd been offline for a few days, taking a break, trying to enjoy the quiet that comes after a long stretch of emotional heavy lifting. Then my inbox exploded. Messages from strangers, survivors, therapists, even a couple of journalists asking if I'd be willing to share more about your journey. I ignored most of it. That was never the point. But what I didn't ignore was the email from the Milagro Foundation, a nonprofit that supports Latinx students. They'd found the Dignity First Grant, read the blog that inspired it, and wanted to partner. Scale the program, maybe even give it national reach. I cried when I read that one. Like ugly cried. On the floor. Because for the first time, the life I was building felt bigger than just surviving. And then my parents found out. I should have known. Fresno's a small place, and my last post, the one about financial abuse hiding behind family values, had quotes that were, well, let's just say if you knew my family, you knew. The call came from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. My dad's voice crackled through the speaker like he hadn't aged a day. Elena, I don't know what kind of lies you're putting out there, but people are asking questions. Your Aunt Rosa should have kept her mouth shut. And you're lucky we haven't taken legal action. I saved the message, then blocked the number. But the next day, I got a certified letter at my office. A cease and desist from an attorney in Fresno. Apparently, my blog was defamatory and damaging to the reputation of the Morales family. I laughed, loudly, in the middle of the break room. Madison, bless her, thought I'd finally cracked. Instead, I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, a friend of Darren's, pro bono. He drafted a response that was firm, calm, and devastatingly factual, pointing out the truth of everything I'd written, backed up with emails, statements, the Discover card history, and that voicemail from my dad. A week later, the legal threat vanished into silence. But the ripple didn't stop there. Turns out my old high school principal had read the blog, and the name Morales stuck, especially since the school had started receiving inquiries about why a promising student like me had been allowed to slip through without support, while the school booster club had funneled thousands into Mateo's sports travel fund. You know that feeling when a rotten foundation finally caves in? That's what it was like watching the community that had propped up their favoritism start to question things. By spring, my parents weren't just facing local whispers. They were under formal investigation for fraudulent use of federal student aid funds. See, one of the credit lines they opened in my name had been used to falsify Mateo's eligibility for need-based athletic scholarships. I'd flagged it years ago, but it finally caught up. No jail time, just restitution and public embarrassment. The kind of fall from grace that cuts deeper than a sentence ever could, especially for people so obsessed with image. And Mateo? He finally called me. No demands, no guilt, just a voicemail. I saw what you built. The grant, the blog, you really did it. I didn't understand it before, but I do now. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't call back. Not out of anger, but because for the first time I didn't need anything from him. Not validation, not guilt, not a relationship held together by obligation. That chapter was closed. I kept writing, kept building the fund with Rosa, kept dating Darren, who eventually asked me to move in. I said yes. One night, sitting on our balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, I pulled out the journal I'd started in therapy. On the last page, I wrote, "They tried to raise a daughter they could use. I became a woman they couldn't reach." And I meant it. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like saying nothing when they try to bait you. Sometimes it's declining the call. Sometimes it's helping someone else escape the thing that nearly broke you. But justice? Justice is when you stop chasing their apology and build a life so solid their absence stops echoing. If you've ever had to walk away from your own blood to protect your peace, I see you. I am you. Drop your story in the comments if you're comfortable. No pressure. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, I'd be glad to share. You can stick around if you'd like. Either way, thank you for sitting with me through this. I don't take it lightly.